Hi, thanks for joining me. Today I want to show you. Hi, thanks for joining me. Today I want to show you how to get the best out of the seasonings that you use. These are just your plain ordinary seasonings. I'll try to get through this without sneezing because I have these containers open. I'm going to use a coffee grinder, which is going to be used to finely grind these seasonings, and that way you not only enhance your flavoring of your foods because the seasoning is almost a powdered form, but you can almost always extend the use of a bottle of seasoning because you're not using so much. It's almost like putting the seasoning in the pan to heat it and allow the seasoning to flower, the flavor to bloom, as they call it. I notice, which you can tell, that the seasoning is going to be largely ground. You can see it through the bottle itself, but when you look at the lid, you see the large holes in the lid, and that's because the fine grounds will have a hard time getting through. So when you look at it, the seasoning, it just may look like that, and that looks fine because that's what we're used to seeing. Trying to keep these separate, so I put the lids back on where they belong. And you see some of this has really small particles at the bottom, but then you see larger particles throughout. So let's see. And these are name brands. Some are name brands and some are not, but you see there's some large particles in there. They can be gourmet style. You see how large those particles are? And this one just has a cap. There are no holes in this cap at all. So it would be really hard pressed to get those through. See how large those are? Nice seasonings. I kind of like, most of these have no salt content. So you see that. And that's all we're going to do. I'm going to take this lid off and use this. So I'll show you this in a moment. But even the gourmet ones, the really fine particles will settle to the bottom, and you will shake this. So these are more finely ground than the rest of them. So I'm going to show you the lid. See, the holes are much smaller, but they're still larger than what we want for what we're going to do. And this is a larger container, and as you can see, it has two sides, one that you can pour, shake right out, and one that you can pour out and one you can shake out. But these holes are rather large on that side. Look at the particles. Well, some of these clunk, and that's due to the ingredients that they have or do not have in there. This is a restaurant style one, which it is the same. It has the spoon out side and the shake side. You see how large those holes are in that shaking side? Pretty large. So here's the container for that. We can see it to the side. When we look to the side, you can see it's a nice mixture. This looks like it would be delicious, but do you see the particles are somewhat large, and that means you have to almost reconstitute. It's almost as if seasonings are dried. Now these are some that are in a vacuum sealed pack, and they too are somewhat large. I'm not too sure if you can see that some of the particles are large, but it doesn't matter. What I like to do is take an empty container. Always keep one of these seasoning containers empty, because I usually make my own blend. I'll take an empty seasoning container, and when I finally grind my stuff up, I'll put it in there. Now if I grind up an entire container, sometimes it doesn't fit back into the container itself. Not all of it at once, but it's okay. No problem. We'll use that up as we go. So I'm going to place some of this in here. Let you see this. This is what's going to happen. And the weird part is, I don't know if you can see that, You see that? So when you're shaking this out into your food, there's some darker particles around here, and then the lighter particles are right in the middle. And so when you're shaking this into your food, you're not getting equal amounts of this seasoning because the finer grounds usually settle to the bottom. The finer particles of the seasoning settle to the bottom, and you don't usually get the full effect of a seasoning. So there's not much left in here in this container, but as you can see, you're not getting the full effect because some of the particles are down at the bottom. Look at that. And you can see as I'm shaking them, these particles are lighter than the other particles. And that's what's happening when you're seasoning your food. You're not really getting all of what's inside that container at one time. And that may be why sometimes your food tastes better than other times, because you're getting more of certain particles in that food than at other times. And that's because you're shaking it, and then you're getting more room in the bottle, and the bottle is able to, the stuff that's in the container is able to mix up. So when you put this back into the container, do not overpack it. If you have to put some of it in a Ziploc bag, do so. But once you grind this up really finely, I don't think you'll have a problem with the mixture. It seems to be much better when it flavors the food. However, you don't want the container packed so that it starts to clunk up, because as you saw here, it clunks up anyway. And that has something to do with the ingredients that they put in here. They usually add an anti-clunking agent in the seasoning, but you see the clunks right there where the moisture gets in to everything and it clunks up. So we're going to remedy that. But just remember, putting it back into the container, all of this is going to fit back into the container because the container was not full. So we just place some, not too much. So if I was going to grind up this whole container, I would only put about half in here at a time, because you don't want to overstress the motor of your grinder. This is just a mere coffee grinder. It doesn't matter what brand it is. It will still work. And seasoning is food, so is coffee, sort of. It's edible. I'll say that. It's edible, so it won't do any harm. What I do suggest is wipe it out in between whatever it is you're grinding up. So say I'm going to grind up this seasoning. I would grind this seasoning up, pour it all back into a container, 1 or 2 containers, what have you. Then I would take a dry paper towel and thoroughly wipe out the inside of this and the inside of this before I would come back and use this type. This says some type of chipotle and garlic seasoning here. So I don't want these two seasonings to mix on any level. I like to keep them as separated as possible. And then this one is for barbecuing, it says. And this is a very large container, so if I'm going to grind up these, I would do it in sections, not half the container, of course, because this is really large. So the sizes of these containers are much different, so you would not want to overstress your motor, so only use a small amount at a time. So there, we have some in there, and I'm going to grind this just by pulsating or pressing it and then shaking it, tapping the side to shake everything back down into the well. I'm going to keep this on here until the end because I don't want to start sneezing. I will start sneezing. So tap it a couple of times to knock everything back down into the well and continue to grind it. And there. You can hear when it gets finely ground, the motor sounds so much different when it's cutting. You can also hear particles tapping up on the sides of the wall of the grinder. Just tap it back down and do it a few more times. It's starting to look like powder and dust up here. Perfect. that's it. And I'm going to give it a couple more twirls. That's it. It sounds like powder. I'm going to unplug it. I'm going to put a mask on so I'm not sneezing my head off. And I'm going to get a flip top sandwich bag to pour this in. See that plume of smoke? Dust cloud coming. Now look at that. It's like powder. It's too much light for you to see. You see that? That's like powder. So, when you shake this into your food, let me get this out of the way. Emptied it right out. It's powder up there. I'll just take the bottom of the a handle of a spoon or fork. Get the most of that out of there. I'm not so concerned with all of that. And then just use this like a funnel. I'm just going to leave a small opening here, and I'm going to twirl this down like that. So it's a small opening. Shake the powder into the middle of the bag. So I grab the two corners of the sandwich bag, tilt it, and pour it right back into the container. Just like a funnel. And that's it. Look at that. That's fine powder. Perfect. So now you must remember, now if you have another container that has much smaller holes than this, like a salt shaker, I do recommend using it if you do, because remember, these holes will put out a lot of seasoning and you're not going to need that much. Pop that top back on and that baby is ready to go. And that is all you need to do. Now you're getting all of the seasoning at once because the seasoning is able to flow through and it's really fine. This is nice to, I tell you, this is my trick, what I do with French fries or tater tots. It's nice to sprinkle this over it. You don't need that much of the seasoning now and it tastes so much better. Okay, thanks for joining me. Until next time.